You know, from ancient military commands all the way to your private messages today, the need to keep secrets is, well, it's as old as humanity itself. But, and this is the key, so is the art of breaking those secrets. It's this endless arms race, right, between code makers and code breakers. So let's trace the story of this epic battle for digital secrecy. Okay, so let's go way back. Over 2,000 years ago, the famous strategist Sun Tzu wrote something that's still so relevant. He said that real security isn't about just hoping the enemy won't attack. Nope, it's about building a defense that's so strong an attack becomes totally pointless. In his words, you make your position unassailable.
And that ancient idea, it has never been more relevant. I mean, think about it. Our information, our secrets, they're constantly under attack in this digital world. So how do we apply this? How do we build those unassailable walls around our digital lives? Well, the answer lies in the art and science of cryptography.
All right, so to really get a grip on this battle, we've got to speak the language of the battlefield, right? So let's quickly go over a few key terms that define this whole struggle for security. First up, we've got the security attack. Pretty straightforward, right? This is basically any action opponent takes to mess with your information. Just think of it as the enemy's move. They're trying to breach your defenses, maybe by listening in, or even changing your data. Okay, so to counter an attack, you're going to need a security mechanism. This is your defense, your tool, your tactic. And the most fundamental mechanism, seriously, the one that underpins almost all of modern security, that's cryptography. You know, the process of scrambling your information. And what's the whole point of using these mechanisms? Well, it's to create a security service. This is the big picture, the overall protection you're aiming for. Think of it as your main goal, like achieving data confidentiality, which is just a fancy way of saying you're keeping your message secret from anyone who shouldn't be seeing it. So this model here, it pretty much shows the entire battlefield at a glance. You've got a sender over here and a receiver over there, and they want to share a secret across some information channel. The problem? There's an opponent, and you've got to assume they're always listening. So to protect the message, the sender uses some kind of security transformation, you know, like encryption. Then on the other end, the receiver uses the secret key to reverse that transformation and get the original message back. This simple diagram, this is basically the blueprint for all modern network security. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's jump back in time to see one of the very first examples of this in action. We are talking, of course, about the one and only Julius Caesar and the clever way he protected his military communications. So Caesar used this really simple but honestly pretty clever trick. He'd just take each letter in his message and shift it forward 3 places in the alphabet. So A becomes D, B becomes E, you get the idea. And as you can see right here, the perfectly readable "meet me after the toga party" turns into this jumbled mess of letters. This is the famous Caesar cipher, one of the very first substitution ciphers in history. And look, for its time, it worked. But it had a fatal flaw. And even though variations of this simple cipher were used for hundreds of years, they could all be broken using the exact same clever technique. So what was the secret to cracking it? The weakness is right here. It turns out human languages are not random at all. In English, for example, the letter E shows up way more often than any other letter. So a codebreaker could just count up the letters in the secret message. If, say, H was the most common letter, they could make a pretty good guess that H was just the encrypted version of E. And that one single clue, that's enough to reveal the entire secret shift, in this case, 3 letters. This whole technique is called frequency analysis, and it's what makes these simple substitution ciphers, well, pretty easy to break. So to defeat something like frequency analysis, codes had to get a lot, and I mean a lot, more complex. So let's fast forward, leapfrogging into the computer age, and talk about the first public worldwide encryption standard, the Data Encryption Standard, or DES. So DES was built on these 2 core principles, ideas that came from the father of information theory himself, Claude Shannon. The first is called diffusion. The idea here is to spread the influence of a single letter from your original message over many, many letters in the encrypted text. This is how you hide those statistical patterns we just talked about. The second idea is confusion, and this is all about making the relationship between the secret key and the final encrypted message as complex and tangled up as you possibly can. So how does DES actually pull this off? Well, it doesn't just do one simple substitution. Oh no. It takes a chunk of data and shoves it through 16 identical rounds of super intense processing. And in each and every round, that data gets scrambled, substituted, and mixed with a piece of the secret key. It's kind of like a 16-stage blender that's just designed to create the most confusion and diffusion possible.
But just like Caesar's cipher, DES also had a fatal flaw. And it wasn't the algorithm's complexity. The problem was the key size. See, DES used a 56-bit key. Now that allows for 72 quadrillion possible keys. And that sounds like a ridiculously huge number, right? But by 1998, a custom-built machine could brute force it in just 3 days. Today, with modern computers, we're talking mere hours. The algorithm itself was strong, but the key, it was just too short. So, the fall of DES kicked off this big global competition to find its replacement. And the winner was a cipher called Rijndael, which we now know as the new Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. And this is the gold standard we all use today to protect literally everything from bank transactions to top-secret government files.
AES also works in rounds, but it has a much more elegant design. It treats the data like a grid, and in each round, it systematically scrambles that grid with 4 different steps. It substitutes bytes, it shifts the rows, it mixes the columns, and finally, it adds in a piece of the secret key. It's this super efficient process that creates an incredibly powerful cipher that, so far, has resisted every practical attack we can throw at it.
But here's the thing. Just having a powerful cipher like AES isn't enough, not by a long shot. How you use that cipher is just as important. I mean, think about it like this. You can have the world's strongest lock, but if you put it on a flimsy cardboard door, it's totally useless, right? The exact same thing is true for encryption. And that brings us to something called modes of operation.
Okay, so what you're looking at here are 2 different ways, or modes, of using a block cipher. Over on the left, you have the simplest mode. It's called Electronic Code Book, or ECB. It just encrypts each block of data all by itself. What's the problem with that? Well, if you have identical chunks of your original message, you get identical chunks of encrypted text. And that leaves a massive glaring pattern for an attacker to see. But on the right, you've got cipher block chaining, or CBC. And here, each block gets mixed with the previous encrypted block before it gets encrypted itself.
And that is the crucial takeaway. By chaining these blocks together, even if you have 2 identical blocks of your original message, they're going to produce completely different encrypted blocks. This one little trick completely destroys patterns, which, let's be honest, is the entire goal of good cryptography. You want the final output to just look like random noise.
So when you look at it, the story of cryptography is just this relentless cycle, isn't it? Innovation, and then eventually obsolescence. We went from Caesar's simple shift cipher to the incredible mathematical elegance of AES. We're always building stronger and stronger walls, but there's always something new on the horizon. Right now, it's the threat of quantum computers, which could potentially shatter our current standards. And that leaves us with one last big question. In this new era, what will the next unassailable position even look like? And who's going to be the one to build it?